Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar. Progress presents What's New with MOVEit Managed File Transfer 2023.0, the latest release in the leading managed file transfer application. I'm David Perez. I'm Senior Product Marketing Manager for the file transfer product lines at Progress. I'm joined today by Jim Cashman, our Principal Product Manager in digital experience for file transfer. And thank you for joining us, Jim. If you are already using MOVEit Managed File Transfer, then you've probably attended one of these before. Thank you for joining us again, if that's the case. In the past, we've received some feedback that we'd like to see a bit more of the technical side of what's new and a bit less about the product benefits, the marketing side, if you will. So we're going to jump into just a very quick introduction to MOVEit in a nutshell, in case you're not totally familiar with the product line. And then we're going to get into the features that are new for this release. And I'm very grateful to have Jim join us for this review, because a lot of these updates are fairly technical in nature. At the end, we welcome your questions. We'll do our best to answer all that we can. And if you come up with a question later on after the webinar is finished and you still want to reach out to us, don't worry. We'll be happy to get back to you with some answers in the future. So with that, why don't we get started? In case you haven't already used MOVEit Managed File Transfer, basically it's the leading managed file transfer product out there. It comes in a suite of different applications. MOVEit Transfer is really the foundational product. It's a Windows Server application to encrypt your sensitive files, all your files, at rest and in transit, giving you an auditable activity log over all your file transfer activity and giving you complete visibility and control over your file transfer activities. So that is the basic application. Progress also offers MOVEit as a service hosted by Progress in the Azure cloud. It is the industry's first managed file transfer as a service, and we feel still the best out there. In addition to both of these, we offer MOVEit Automation, which is an application for automating tasks and complex workflows. You could use it with MOVEit Transfer, MOVEit Cloud, a secure FTP server like SFTP server, including a wider array of endpoints. Enables you to connect to AWS S3 compatible endpoints, Azure blobs, a lot of different endpoints. And the beauty of the MOVEit Automation is that you can set up those complex workflows without the need for programming. So it makes it much more accessible for organizations that want to take the burden off of their IT teams. And then, of course, MOVEit Gateway, which enables the deployment of MOVEit Transfer within secure networks behind the firewall. So the gateway sits outside of your firewall and ensures that data storage, authentication, all file transfer activities don't occur in the DMZ of your network. And that's it in a nutshell. I mean, there's a lot more detail there that our MOVEit experts could discuss with you for your particular environment, but those are the main pillars of the product line. And if you haven't heard lately, MOVEit has been voted the leading managed file transfer software by G2 software reviewers for spring 2023. And what sets it apart? Well, unlike traditional file transfer tools, even secure FTP, we're securing files at rest and in transit, and we're giving you reporting and auditing of file transfer activities that it just goes above and beyond. So that's MOVEit in a nutshell. By all means, if you have questions about the product line, let us know. But now we're going to jump into the new features of this release, and of course this will be the first of 2 releases we have every year. And as always, we do our best to incorporate what our customers are asking for into new releases. This one is no different. So, keep letting us know what works for you and your organization. You'll likely see those kinds of updates in future releases. So to start off, this release offers the ability to self-publish TLS or SSL server certificates. And, just to put this in context, right? MOVEit Transfer system administrators can enable org admins to upload or remove their own certificates using the MOVEit Transfer web UI. And we'll look at that UI in a moment. And that when I say self-service certificate, that does not necessarily mean that the certificates are self-signed. It's actually, of course, the industry best practice to use certificates that are publicly endorsed and recognized by a certificate authority. And we still recommend doing that. When you go into the MOVEit Transfer admin tool, this is what you see. So step 1, the sysadmin makes the self-publish available for use by an organization with a simple checkbox. And then, click the update. And then you'll see at the bottom, org admins can now upload the certificates directly here and approve that or reject it. And then in step 3, you receive a notification as a sysadmin of a certificate in a pending state, and the sysadmin can apply the certificate to make it active for the site or reject it, right? And this is a current approved certificate shown. So really clean, straightforward interface there. And we just...
Can I add a little color, David?
I would love to, have your comments, Jim.
Yeah, sure. So from a product management perspective or from product perspective, larger customers that have orgs managed by others, one of our larger customers is ourselves in cloud, and the ability of these org administrators to manage their own TLS certificates for their own orgs always been problematic in terms of how much work the sysadmin needs to be involved, and this is a way to improve that flow. Just to sort of reiterate a couple of the high points, as David said, the functionality itself needs to be turned on for the org by the sysadmin. And then the org administrator can do whatever that person normally does to source a certificate and then upload it. At that point, the sysadmin would get a message saying, "Hey, this just happened. Do you want to approve it?" The couple of interesting points is it has to be turned on. With for an org that has its own bindings, by the way, which normally is the case in this world anyway when you're worried about certificates like this. But then and then the org admin does most of the work, and then ultimately though the sysadmin gets that final say of pushing it into production. But that's a lot less work for that sysadmin than was what before. He or she can just sort of take the inputs given from the org admin and then publish them. So a lot less workload there and a lot more self-service for the org admin. Yeah, those are the only points.
Fantastic. If I'm not mistaken, this is one of those features that was requested by the customer as well. Nice. Great. Next new feature, log exports. In MOVEit Transfer logs, this logs view, we provided admins and users an easier way to customize and view export log data as a CSV file. And so basically you're getting this view, going to the menu on the left, and then you can see the individual log entries there, and then just export the current view. How's this different from what we had previously, Jim?
Well, it was very simple. We did not have this. You might think, boy, this is pretty basic, and I might say that it is very simple, but it's very powerful. And it was, to David's point about the ideas portal, we want to let you know we do read them. That this was one of the most highly requested items in the ideas portal. Definitely a top 10 item.
Nice. That's great. And here we start to get to the fuzzy edges of my personal expertise. Now, you're probably aware that MOVEit employs the MySQL database. For this release, for MOVEit Transfer and automation, installers apply a new MySQL default settings to the my.ini during an install or an upgrade of the MySQL database. And these updated settings will improve the performance, provide better settings for InnoDB. And this is basically, that quick view you will see here, configuring the database type, server name, so on.
Want me to step in and give you, David, a little?
Do you have any comments here, Jim? I'd love to hear them.
Yeah, so this one is one that you may have been involved, depending on how recently you are a customer of ours, but MySQL, which you can use out of the box with MOVEit, although a lot of our larger customers use SQL Server. We went through an engine change in MySQL recently, a release or so ago, where we got a much improved database table engine from MySQL. And we took a look at our INI file, and there was some stuff in there that wasn't appropriate anymore, and there was some stuff in there that was not as performant or did not put the system in as performant a place as it could be. So we made a few tweaks to the file. And so the stuff that may have been related to the old database engine, known as MyISAM, have been taken out, and stuff for InnoDB have been put in, and as well as changed a memory setting that should improve memory performance on MySQL. So those are kind of the details.
I love it. That's great. Is there anything there that an admin would need to be aware of in terms of specific settings, that something you might need to tweak, or is this really just happening in the background?
It's happening in the background on upgrade. So if we find stuff that people have modified in the file, we don't change it. So we do look at the file. But if we see that the file just has some old stuff that was only applicable to the old way of doing things, we comment that out, and then add or tweak this memory setting. So yeah, okay. we go through the file carefully to not step on anything.
Fantastic, great to know. I want to mention too, regarding upgrade, I think a lot of our customers historically have looked at their current deployment and said, you know what, it's not broke. I'm not going to go messing with it and do an update. We do countless feature upgrades, but also minor security fixes that are rolled into every release. And so I highly recommend that. If there were some issue we needed to alert customers about, chances are, the first question is, are you on the current release? Because it's, going to take care of a lot of things that are known, and it'll just give us a better point from which to make corrections. So if you have a current support contract, just highly recommend taking advantage of that and getting your release up to date. It is free for customers with current support contract.
Can I add something to that too, David? Just another sales pitch. We have this thing called the PANS network, which is a notification network. Many of you are probably on it, but sometimes what we've found is that people in companies, like say in the purchasing team, or finance, or somebody, or higher up in the IT organization, is on the PANS list, and it's not somebody who's working with the product day to day. And we really would like, those people can be on the PANS list, but we'd really like folks that are working with the product day to day, because it's in that PANS list that you're going to get your first notification, for instance, if we have an important security or an important bug fix. So if what I'm saying doesn't make any sense to you, up in the community, there should be a way, or through your sales representative, I don't know the precise way, but I can find out, to get yourself added to the PANS network. Very critical to make sure that you're running with the latest and greatest.
Absolutely. That's great. Yeah, thanks for adding that. This next feature, I think, is probably one of the most important for this release. Elliptic curve algorithms. So this is asymmetric keys, right? Server host keys and client authentication keys. And it just enables SFTP servers to have stronger host keys, right? And allows clients to use those same algorithms. Definitely preferred to the RSA key schemes. We're talking, much stronger encryption keys that are much higher performing for the SSH SFTP server. We can generate, using this elliptic curve algorithm, keys that are 256, 384, 521-bit variants. And to put it in perspective, that would be something like the functional equivalent of like a 15,000-bit RSA key in terms of security. So just a lot more difficult to break, and really where the security ought to be, where keeping your files secure is an essential business priority. And yeah, you can authenticate users who present client keys using these algorithms. Quick note at the bottom, this also pertains to MOVEit automation. So you can now import or create ACC client keys that can be used to authenticate with MOVEit Transfer, other SFTP servers using algorithms. So this seems like a huge step forward, Jim. Do you have any thoughts on this new feature?
Yeah. So you may have noticed, folks, that over the past release or so, we've been, for both automation and transfer, modernizing the SFTP stack. Now, you may have noticed in the previous release words about elliptical curve, and there was some elliptical curve in previous releases, particularly in key exchange. But as David went over, what we've added now as another step to this refresh of our SFTP stack is two things. One is the ability for the SFTP server to present elliptic curve host keys, which David mentioned, which these days are pretty much, de rigueur, or what's expected, particularly the Edwards curve, the ED25519, which is a variant of an elliptical curve key. And in addition, so that's just us presenting those keys, which when an SFTP client connects, it'll take a fingerprint of that key. In addition, as David mentioned, clients that authenticate against transfer using a client-based key authentication in SFTP can also use a now elliptical curve for those authentication keys. A couple of points, or at least one point technically, that you should be aware of. Right now, the way transfer works is we only support one host key at a time. And so we know that many of you, all of you thus far would have been set up with RSA keys, and you may have customers that are depending on those keys when they connect. And so we did not want to upset the apple cart with that. So you now have the capability to do this, but we did not change the defaults. Having said that, we are working on, I can't tell you exactly when it will be released, but we are working on the next phase of this. I usually don't give out futures like this, but in this particular context, it makes sense because I think it'll be the next question you ask. We are now working on the next phase of this, which will allow the system to present multiple host key types simultaneously, which is what other SFTP servers do. And at that point, you will have the best of all worlds. You'll be able to continue to serve your existing customers with the RSA keys, as well as publish these new elliptical curve keys. And then, of course, when an SFTP client comes in and negotiates these keys with the server, they'll pick the best one. So that is coming, but we're almost there. But this is a good step, because if you install fresh, this is what you want to do. You want to choose an elliptical curve key.
Right. Do you think there's any significant performance difference between selecting 256-bit versus a 521-bit variant?
There could be. I will be perfectly honest, I haven't seen the benchmarks. I know we test those, but I don't have them off the top of my head as to what they found. I mean, it is one of the benefits of these keys is that they are faster. So, but I don't have comparisons between the different bit strengths. Sorry.
That's fair. Yeah, I think it's important not just to consider the capabilities, but also constraints, so that we can make it work in the environment where we are. So that's great. And I appreciate the forward-looking.
Well, you won't get that. You won't get that out of me very often, since I'm in product management. But I felt the need to say we are working on that because we know customers expect that.
I appreciate that. That's great. And configuring these keys, we try to make it fairly straightforward in the interface. As I mentioned, you're going to take up less space than an RSA key using the elliptical curve keys, and you can see how you go about selecting that. That SSH-ED25519, it's the most recommended public key algorithm currently available. So we hope that this makes it really straightforward to implement that new feature for you. And then for our very performance conscious environments, we have MySQL Server read-only database performance feature supported. So when you use Microsoft SQL Server as the database engine for transfer, you can use the MOVEit Transfer config utility to leverage the read-only database instance that SQL Server High Availability offers for scaling heavy read view operations. And basically in the config utility, there's a use read-only option for reporting in the database tab. And so when that's selected, the system uses the SQL Server High Availability read-only database for viewing audit logs through the web interface, generating a report, and uploading data graphs and reports. This is really meant to just speed up things significantly. I think where you're working with very large databases, this will be appreciated very much. Something to check out and see if that would help you in delivering what you need for your organization in terms of reporting. Again, pretty straightforward interface for implementing those things. Set up under username and password, authentication, and then this is how you would set up the read-only option for reporting down here on the bottom right.
The only flavor I would add to that, of course, is setting up the high availability option in SQL Server. There's various ways to do it. We work with most of them. We pick the right strings down there for what we believe the configuration you're set up in. But because there are different ways to do this, it sometimes it takes a little bit of tweaking just because we don't know your particular setup, but we can figure it out.
Right, absolutely. And I mean, I think this is something our professional services team could help with, setting up the environment in the right way, get the most out of that. A couple of additional features. The option to keep or remove home folder when the user account expires. So this is an improvement that makes it so there's basically an expiration policy so that you automatically delete a user's home folder when the user is deleted, deleting their home folders and subfolders, and it extends the original behavior, which preserved the folder structure for expired accounts. Definitely talk with your IT team about whether this is something that makes sense. I know as a sysadmin in the past, I've occasionally received that phone call from legal or from HR and said, hey, do you have these files still? And hopefully the answer was yes. Sometimes it was, you know what, we have everything we need, please delete it and remove all access. And so it's a handy feature to implement if it's consistent with your policies. And then extending the gateway tunnel configuration so you can now handle specific IP addresses for cases where your site requires this. Jim, do you have any color to add on that? Maybe why we added this feature?
Yeah, a little bit of color, because this gets down into the bits and bytes that that may require some engineering. When we create this tunnel between transfer and the gateway, the tunnel works in a very specific way and expects certain things, including this sort of loopback address of the 127. And that's fairly typical for the way the tunnel of the kind that we create operates. It seems a little bit nonsensical sometimes to a sysadmin, but it is fairly typical to do it the way that we initially set it up. Having said that, some customers, not many, but we felt the need to add it, had very specific reasons for wanting to change it. And so we made it possible to change it. But two things I would say: using the way it's done out of the box not only works, but even though to a sysadmin, more of a network guy who hasn't done a lot with tunnels, it may look a little weird, the IP address we use, but it is actually the kind of tunnel that we are piggybacking on top of does indeed work. But this just gives a little more options when your IT team needs you to do this. So it's a little extra bit of flexibility if your IT team asks you for very specific change on the tunnel configuration.
Got it.
It shouldn't change any of the usability of the product. So.
Right. Okay. Fantastic.
And I should mention on the top, that's an example again of a customer idea that at the time at the time of release, just in the last week or so, it was the #1 requested transfer idea in the customer portal. So I think it's good evidence that we're trying to go through those customer portal issues, or ideas portal, excuse me, and knock off some of the highest content, the highest vote getting items.
I love it. Yeah, that's what keeps me, just excited working on this product day to day, is knowing that, it's not just something that we've made and it's just sitting there and, you get what you get. We're really working hard to keep it current, relevant, and make it more usable with every release. I think that gets us to the end of the new features, but we would love to entertain any questions you have for me or for Jim, especially for Jim. Such a great thing to have you here with us on the call today. We're going to see if we have questions from our audience. Let's see. At this point, let's see, why don't we start off with implementation. Somebody is asking about the upgrade path. Is there, I guess, the latest version that you would need to already have in place in order to just upgrade directly on to 2023.0? Jim, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so this is where I'm going to give you a very generic answer, because people's installations can be very different. Some require some hand-holding, some don't. In general, what we say is that things should be fairly smooth sailing two releases back. So back to the 0 release of a given year. So, you know,
Mhm.
at 2023.1, we'd go back to 2021.0.
Okay.
However, there can be special cases where you may want to talk to technical support about that. In general, if you're older than that, the general advice is to get yourself up to that level and then move forward. But like I
Right.
said, I want to be very clear because, you know, we have copious knowledge base articles on how to handle certain circumstances, and please look over all that and take care to follow the planning knowledge base articles, and take care to compare, you know, your particular environment to things that are mentioned there. And if you need to ask somebody for some advice, please do. So the
Yeah.
answer I gave is very generic.
So helpful. I appreciate that. I have a question. Does this new version contain elliptical curve SSH keys for SFTP?
We just said yes.
Yes.
For
The
both transfer and automation.
Transfer and automation. And is the SSL certificate to org admin, is it available in MOVEit Cloud as well?
Yeah, so here's what's going on with that. The cloud is, you know, is one of our biggest customers, our own customer, and yes, that is one of the things that we will be deploying. It has not been deployed yet, but you should see that in the coming months. And so that, for cloud customers, will, I think, who have gone through SSL changes, certificate changes, where there's a lot of back and forth with the progress administrators and so forth. This will improve that process, I think, quite measurably for you.
Oh, great. Follow-on question to that: can a local time zone be made available in MOVEit Cloud with this release?
That is not yet in the product, so that is on the roadmap. It's on a shorter term roadmap, but I cannot make any promises on that one. But we know that that is very much requested, and so it's got a lot of, how should we say, a lot of people looking at it. Let's put it that way right now.
Right. Would it be you know, maybe a workaround or an ersatz for the time being, if you're using MOVEit Cloud, just to have your instance of MOVEit Cloud running in the cluster within your time zone?
Well, with cloud, we run the clusters, so no. I mean, if they're not where we are, you know, it's not going to be, it's not going to work. So that, you know, that's we know. I mean, let's be frank. The question, you know, exposes a real problem point in the product, and we've got the message loud and clear.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Yeah. I've had several conversations with, you know, our sales team, customers, and yeah, it seems just as important to know the constraints of the product as much as the capabilities, so that, you know, we can make it work successfully. So great to know. There's a question: are all these changes applicable for MOVEit Cloud as well? And I think that the question behind the question is, when will these updates roll out to MOVEit Cloud? Because we know they're available with MOVEit Transfer, and typically features from a particular release appear a little bit later in MOVEit Cloud. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I would not want to give a specific date and sort of put the cloud team on the
Right.
spot. So I think it would be better to say soon. But yeah, I think pretty much looking at, let me just think about this. The ones that you will see, you will ultimately get key support. Let's see, you get the TLS self-service, of course, the ability to export logs. We already use some of the DB acceleration stuff. So yeah, pretty much all of it.
Fantastic. I think we've got time for one more question. And this one, I think, is fairly broad, but Is there a client for Windows in 2023.0? And the high level, the answer is yes. There are lots of different options there. Web clients, mobile clients for iOS and Android. Something that came out last year, which I'm still thrilled about, is the MOVEit add-in for Microsoft Outlook, which can be deployed centrally through your Exchange Admin Center or Office 365 Admin Center, and just appears in Outlook, and it makes it really intuitive and easy to deploy across an organization without the need for end users to install or maintain anything or update anything. So lots of good options there.
I might add a plug for one thing, which is that a lot of customers I find haven't availed themselves of, which is the desktop client, which we released two or 3 years ago, and that's another good thing to take advantage of.
Definitely. So I think there was a question about custom log file export. How about exporting CEF logs for MOVEit automation?
Yeah, so it's a good request, I guess, and I'm not sure if that's in the ideas portal. The only thing I would say at this point to that is what you could do now is use a REST API if you have it to get it in JSON and then do some transmogrification, if you will. And if it's not in the ideas portal, I would recommend that you create the idea. But it is a good idea, as the world of logging and reporting is now expanding greatly to a much bigger, or has expanded to a much bigger universe. But not yet. We don't do that.
Okay. Fair enough. Yeah. And if you need help getting into the ideas portal, let us know. We'll hit you back there. Let's see. We'll go ahead.
Well, I was just going to read it. You can, will this track and question came in, will this track and notify with cert is approaching expiration and show a list? And no, it doesn't. It would show the screen David showed if you have a particularly busy system. If multiple requests were coming in from multiple orgs, you would see that. But as far as an overall dashboard, if you will, of the current state of all these things, no, it does not do that. But that is a great idea.
Right. Yeah, that would be nice to see. If I'm not mistaken, certificate management is one of those things that happens, with some regularity, but more like an annual, like even a 3-year basis. It's something that, will be tracked at a pretty high level. So, yeah. Do you think that's something that we would consider adding later?
I do, and I mean, again, I would recommend go up. I don't know off the top of my head if it's on the ideas portal, but I would go up, and if it's not, add a request up there. Nothing helps us prioritize things more than when we see things get votes.
No doubt. So. Okay, great. Another question: can you revert to the original SSH keys, but also keep the new ones, or is it possible to enhance it to use both? I think you touched on this a bit, but.
I think perhaps the question is, what would happen if maybe you went with the new key and wanted to get back to the old key? Those keys don't go away. It's just which one you've set to be default right now. So yeah, the keys, you don't have to wipe the deck. I mean, obviously we're still going to keep the ability to create RSA keys, for the foreseeable future. So they don't disappear. It's all, for right now, it's just about which one you set as the default. But what you're going to, for a particular org, let's say you can have one for each org. In the future, you'll have this ability to set up multiples, one each for the different kinds for a given org, and flip them around or keep them all published. So you're trying the new key, but I want you to be, if we talk about what are the implications, if you don't know, if you haven't thought it through, if you were to change the host key if you have an existing system and were to change the host key to one of the elliptical curve keys, then your SFTP customers, probably when you are using an SFTP client, including something like MOVEit Automation, when you first connect, it asks you to approve the fingerprint of the server and stash it someplace so it remembers who that server was. If you change the key under the covers right now, then your end users that are using SFTP would be prompted again to save, which may not be the experience you want. It may be because you say you're improving security, and I'd have to agree with you on that. One thing to consider is you may have some customers that for whatever reason, they haven't updated one of their clients and it doesn't yet speak with the elliptical curve language. My recommendations would definitely be anybody who's installing new to use elliptical curve, and if you're in a really high security environment and know who the end users are, perhaps you're in what we refer to as a system-to-system use case, where it's a handful of people and you know what their clients are and whether they can handle it, I would definitely recommend you change to it. If there's ambiguity there, it might not be time quite yet to change to it. But once we deliver this ability to have multiple keys, then you'll be able to, be the best to the older clients as well as the newer clients, and sort of slowly phase out the older clients as necessary. So that's what I would say there. Be on the lookout for when you change, if customers are going to get this new announcement that they've got a new key to approve and those sorts of things. But if you're looking to improve security and you want to go through that, I could not disagree with that. I think you should do that. Just be aware of what the implications are of making that change.
Okay, excellent answer. I appreciate that. This one's a little more specific. I'm not sure worked at all with this. Basically, the question is, currently MOVEit does not allow the creation of users via the Swagger API with a specific expiration policy ID. Will we be able to choose to delete or keep the home folder for expiring users and set this through the Swagger API?
That is a good question, and I would have to look into that one. I believe they added it, but don't quote me on that. Okay. We usually try to be careful about making sure the new features are accessible, but I would have to get back to you on that one.
Okay, that's great. I appreciate that, and we will get back to you. Make sure you drop your email in the contact for us so that we can get back to you on that. It's a great question. I think we've got time for one more before I sign off. It has to do with upgrading. Basically, at what version level should we consider just doing a completely new install versus just upgrading in place? Is there a limit to the MOVEit Transfer version that we could just upgrade in place?
I want to be, I'll answer it, but I want to be careful in my answer because in tech support, upgrades tend to be an area where customers do have issues. Installations are an interesting thing. You sit at this funny nexus between the product and somebody's messy operating system, messy network, or whatever, and we usually can deal with those things just fine, and sometimes there's weird things. So I am going to give you a generic answer, but I would like to caution the customers to make sure that they've gone through the docs and the knowledge base articles and have looked for very specific issues that they might, where their environment is different than perhaps sort of the normal installation and those sorts of things. Generally, what we say is 2 releases back, generally is what we say. So for example, you know, at 2023.1, we'll actually go back to 21.0. It's 2 releases back to the 0 number of that year. So in theory, it could be 2.5. And the general idea is either get there, if you're in that boat, fine. And if you're not quite there, you can do a multiple step hop. So I've given you the generic answer, but I want to caution you to be very careful, and if anything you're worried about, give tech support a call, or even sometimes if you have a really large environment, sometimes professional services can give some advice. But
Definitely.
I've given you the generic answer.
Fantastic. I think that is great for now. I really appreciate all the questions and your attentiveness today. Drop us your email in the chat if you have another question you'd like us to answer. We'll get back to you after the webinar. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great day.